Welcome to Athletes and Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey. I'm Rob Finkelstein, founder and CEO of Alumni Direct. We've created a platform to help athletes and other alumni network and connect with each other and tap into various resources in health and finance and career. But more importantly, this is all about athletes transitioning out of sport. It's such a major issue today, just challenges they face in health and finance, and we want to make a difference. So we interview former college and professional athletes, and we talk about their transition and their journey out of sport into successful business leadership and entrepreneurship. So excited today to have Hania Taduran. How you doing?
Doing well. How about you?
I'm doing great, thanks. So Hania played beach volleyball at FIU, Florida International University, down in Miami. And she played there. And then when she was done playing volleyball, she got into studying for a master's, getting into clinical psychology, and just really understanding it, and then working in the telehealth space. But all along the way, she wanted to really make an impact on athletes and helping them out. So she's the founder of Breaking Barriers, which, excited to hear more about the different great things that you're doing there. So talk about playing sports growing up. How did that shape you leading up into college?
Yeah, definitely. It's a great question. I think there's two sides of it. I think one, there's the side that, is the testament to what I do is the mental health aspect. And I think growing up in the early years, sport was definitely a coping mechanism for me. It was a great distraction for, things that were going on in my life. I was able to kind of let out my emotions onto the court and use it as kind of a vessel. And I think as I grew up and started to play at a higher level, which is obviously the dream, I kind of saw the other side of it too, where it's my mental health, things that I maybe didn't process, like some grief that I dealt with, I saw spill onto the court in ways that are surrounded by performance anxiety and placing your worth onto your play. And so I definitely realized that there was just such a need for balancing the mental health side of things with the way that you show up onto the court. So I think that's one piece of it, is kind of struggling with the balance of my mental and my physical. And then the second is everything, that sport has taught me is now who I am, right? So there's a lot of positives that came out of that. My leadership styles, my work ethic, it taught me, everything I know about teamwork and culture. And I think overall, all of the things that kind of shaped my experience growing up playing sports is now who I am outside of the sport as well. So I think it is everything to me.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, there's so many lessons and life lessons that sports teach people, and it definitely, everybody I talk to, I mean, it's a big shaping of their whole, the next steps in their college and their careers after that. So let's talk about education. So we talk about this a lot. When you were at school, was there education, like not just a one-day thing, but like classes or workshops kind of geared towards athletes transitioning after sport?
Yeah. That's a great question. And sadly, I don't feel that I did really have that. I think those resources exist, but I think, and this is something we talk about with mental health too, right? These resources in all of these realms exist, but do athletes know how to access them, or are they actually using them? I think a lot of times is no. I'm sure if I saw out, seminars or things that were related to networking and transitioning outside of sport, I could have had access, but I couldn't say that they sat us down and we're like, hey, this is a educational resource for you and it's really important and here's why. I wish I had that, because I think, struggling with that transition, that identity loss, and now what do I do for that next chapter is something that a lot of athletes struggle with. So unfortunately, I think, I didn't have that experience.
Yeah, and it's a problem, and I think more schools are trying to address it, but it's typically maybe not enough. I mean, at Alumni Direct, we talk about working with resource partners in the different areas, and then kind of helping schools to develop additional curriculum, not only for the current athletes, but for the alum athletes as well. I mean, I would say that if as a parent, if you've got a student athlete and they're looking at different schools, and let's say they might be looking at 3 or 4 schools, I think it'd be comforting to them to know that if a school is going to be, have that education available, not only while they're there, but, when they're done with their sport as an alumni. So I think that is something that's definitely important.
Yeah, and I think too, something that's interesting I've noticed with a lot of schools will do is you talk about the the alumni aspect when you're graduated. The only kind of emails that a lot of alumni will get is things related to donating to the
Yeah,
program or the school in general, rather than, which is important, right?
sure.
But also, okay, but let's come together and here's or resources or groups. Here's like-minded alumni that you might not want to connect with that are in your area. I don't think that really exists. I think a lot of times it's centered around, right, donations and coming back to give back, which again is important. But
Let's talk about networking, connecting, and talk about the importance of doing that while you're still playing your sport.
yeah, I mean, networking and connecting while you're still playing is something that I think a lot of athletes kind of take for granted. My connection, all of my network, I would say, right after graduating, all of those people are athletes, are coaches who are in our ecosystem. And I think what we don't realize is that people who are non-athletes are constantly networking because they have to go out of their way and they have the time to go to some events that are held by the school or, whatnot. But when you're an athlete, your community is all athletes, right? And you may not always have the time to prioritize networking and building that relationship. So, one, fostering the relationships you already have is really important. And even when you graduate, staying in touch with not only teammates, but other, athletes at your department or at your school, or even competitors. With Breaking Barriers now, I'm reaching out to athletes that I knew that we played against each other, right? You use your connection when you're trying to build something. And I think when I was in college, I didn't realize how important those connections would be because you're just going day by day trying to survive as an athlete, right? But I wish I would have kind of paid a little bit more attention. Another thing I'll say is professors as well. I think that we really, really need to hone down on athletes prioritizing their relationships with their professors. And a lot of times I think what happens is the disconnect because of the time that you're balancing with academics and sport. It can often feel just like, okay, well, I just need to pass this class and then I can focus on the next, whatever it is, next game. But in reality, especially with the work I'm doing now, but in all fields, right? Those professors are not just professors, right? They're people who are doing research in your industry.
Yeah.
They're people that are writing books in your industry. They're connected to so many other people. And so making those connections, even if it's just quick office hours, hey, I'm interested in this field. I would love to stay connected after graduation. Those relationships mean a lot. And they, again, you don't think it matters, but then in 5 years, you're trying to build something. And it's like, oh, that professor I had was, connected with this one person who could help me. So I think it's tremendously important.
Yeah, you bring up so many good points there. I'm glad you did. And, for everybody out there listening to, it's just tap into everybody out there. I mean, and have foster a pay it forward giving mentality. I think, it goes a long way when you take that approach of like, how can I help you versus how can you help me and what's in it for me type thing. And I think I like what you said about just, it goes back even probably before college. I mean, think about high school, same thing. I mean, you've got these teammates and you got their parents and coaches. There's so many people out there that are willing to help. And I think just, be willing to get out of your comfort zone and don't look at it. Sometimes I was talking to somebody earlier and they were talking about like, networking. Sometimes it might have a stigma to it, like the name of networking, but it's relationship building.
Right.
And just go about it and definitely do that. The other thing that comes up as well is just looking at kind of cross networking amongst athletes. And you hit it on there. You were talking about doing that. How was that? Like, did you see that, at FIU, just not only like the football players just kind of staying in their silo of basketball, but maybe coming together and everybody kind of rooting each other on and building those relationships across sports?
Yeah, my experience has been exactly that. I think that athletics, even at a bigger school, but especially mine was a little more medium sized, athletics is really a family, not just team to team, but everyone knows everyone. You're spending all day passing by in that training rooms and doing the same study hall hours, etc. So I think that my experience was this sense of community and family. And although maybe I didn't know a certain football player, we both kind of have this, oh, we're both athletes, we share things in common, which is all you need to have that kind of connection with someone in the future. Let's say you move to a different city and that athlete happens to live there as well. I think I'd feel comfortable, even though we weren't great friends in college, to be like, hey, I saw that you moved here, would love to connect, because that's just how important this shared connection of what we experience is, right? There's such a low percentage of people who are high level athletes. And so we're able to kind of connect with each other in ways that not other people can understand. So those relationships are huge, I think.
Yeah, I agree. It's so important to do it because again, you've got, it's that common connection, which will lead into the next question. The just you have that affinity as an athlete, and then in general, looking at alumni engagement. So, when you were at school, was there a push from the athletic department to bring back athletes, and not just for the homecoming games and all, but more so to kind of mentor or work with other athletes there?
Mhm. Yeah, I haven't seen that yet, experienced that yet. I would love that, and I think that it's definitely needed, especially since we're talking about how hard that transitioning period is. It would feel nice to be able to come back to what was once your home and have the group kind of brought back together. But unfortunately, I mean, I haven't seen a lot of those programs existing to date.
Yeah, and I think what we're trying to work on, we've got ideas like, we've talked to some of the smaller schools, especially where maybe there's a little more alignment between alumni association and the athletic department versus the bigger schools. But talking about ways to create networking events so that like each month, you would highlight an alumni athlete from that school, having conversations like you and I are having now, and then open up to networking afterwards to just kind of bring people back. And there seems to be a real interest in that, kind of like you were saying, you kind of wish it was there.
I love that. And I think too a need that at least I would love is more industry specific kind of bringing back within athletic communities. I think something that's hard, I think there's misconceptions about what networking really is. It feels like there's this pressure to, force this conversation or force this connection when, like you mentioned, it is really just, maintaining a relationship, creating a relationship. But I think a lot of times when there's no specific niche or goal, and you put all these people in a room and it's like, here's a networking event, I think it's kind of hard for people to get out of their comfort zone and start new conversations out of nothing. So what I've seen is, and this is just in my professional life, when you put like okay, athletes who are interested in finance, athletes are interested in whatever the industry is, I think that whether you have people, coming up and talking, and then after there's a networking session, I think those conversations flow a little bit easier if there's a kind of specific topic. But in general, I think, I mean, there's so many ways to go about it, and I do think it's easier said than done, right? Because again, people have a hard time knowing how to network, I think.
Right. Yeah, it can be daunting to people, and I think that's where the education comes into play too, is just kind of teaching them how to do it and have fun with it. I mean, it's something that comes naturally to me, and kind of what we're trying to do with bringing people together in communities, alumni direct. But yeah, it's something to teach and have them do it. So I don't know if you got a chance to watch or listen to any of the episodes. So if you did, you'll know the questions coming. If you didn't, not a big deal. So if you were to go back in time, a little back to the future, actually head out on the DeLorean, and you could give advice to freshman Hania, what would you say to her? 10 words or less.
I would say to enjoy the present moment, um, because you will miss it when you're gone, and to remember to take the positives from your experience of being an athlete and translate it into whatever the next chapter is.
Okay, that's great. And then fast forward to senior Hania, what would you say to her?
Yeah, I would just say how proud I am of her. She came a really long way from that freshman year. I think it was kind of go 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 and trying to figure out my bearings. But senior year me, I think, really had things together and was very motivated for her goals. So I'm yeah, just say I'm proud of her.
That's great. So let's talk a little bit about, sometimes I'll talk about this and I'm curious, from a NIL, name, image, likeness, is
Mm.
that something that you're seeing reaching the beach volleyball community? I mean, people always think of the portals and they think of all the money and football and basketball, that, but like from a different sport perspective, are things going on in that space?
Yeah, it's, minimal compared to, like you're saying, some of the bigger sports, which is, another conversation of beach volleyball being a newer sport and a newer addition. So being a little bit, underserved in that way. But I definitely saw, there's NIL deals happening. I did a couple and we're affiliated with a couple platforms that connected you to NIL deals. But again, they were very just small deals where maybe they're smaller companies as well. And I think it felt more authentic the way that the beach volleyball community was doing NIL deals, because there isn't that pull to going to a full different transfer portal based on money, etc. It was more just trying to promote companies that they truly aligned with. So, I mean, I saw it, but it wasn't a major, factor during my years, at least.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's important. I think there's obviously the positives and negatives, and I think one thing is just is education. There's a lack of education out there. Just you know, starting an LLC, and you're going to pay taxes, and you do become that entrepreneur. You got your own business as an NIL athlete. So I think that's stuff that they should definitely look at.
Yeah, there was definitely a lack of training, and I think even from especially my freshman year when I first started, NIL was very new, so the misconceptions and lack of education was definitely a factor of people, maybe barriers to accessing deals, etc. So yeah, definitely would be great for athletes to be able to have those resources, or whatever it is, if it's within their team or the department, community seminars about it and things like that would be great.
All right, good deal. So now we'll fast forward. So you played sports your whole life. You played beach volleyball since you were growing up, and now comes a time to kind of I'm sure you still play, but just the time to like competitive career over for college. Talk a little bit about your transition out of sport. And you kind of mentioned in the beginning, but let's kind of dig into that.
Yeah. You know, when I was preparing to graduate and play my last match and do all of these things, I didn't really think that I would feel so strongly about it and it would affect me so heavily. I thought, I've been doing this long enough. I'm I'm ready for the next chapter. But when I, played that last match, it was overwhelming, feeling that came on me of okay, well, who am I without this sport, right? And it was really a loss of identity. I think it was a lot harder than I expected. I didn't want to let go of some of the things that I did love, the competitive aspect, having that sense of direction, having that structure to your life, and then all of a sudden one day it's just kind of gone. So it was really definitely, I kind of talked about this before, that it felt like, in a way, grief, right? Is grieving the person I once was that was tied to this athletic identity. It had been, my structure, my community, sense of direction. So, when that ended, I did have to grieve it. Not really just, not the game itself, not the sport itself, but who I was playing the sport. So, and even as I kind of fast forward, started my next chapter, I see a lot of the things that of the sports culture coming out in both positive and negative ways. So on the negative side, or you could kind of see as negative, is this pressure towards productivity that I experienced during work, right? Is I'm measuring my value with how much I'm getting done, how I'm performing, which is because of things that are, told to us as we're athletes, and the culture behind that. So learning to kind of quiet those things down, and then on the positive is take all of those strengths into whatever I'm doing next, right? So like I mentioned before, the leadership, the discipline, resilience, the competitive edge, and the work ethic, those are all things that, although not specific to my sport, I'm still taking with me, that my sport helps shape from my identity. So I had to kind of separate, yes, I'm grieving, but also I'm still taking pieces of who I was. It's not my sport isn't my entire identity. And it shaped me, but it's not, me at a core. So the transition, I had always known I was going to go to grad school for a long time, that I was going to be a therapist. So immediately I already had that plan of action. But there was a pressure that I wasn't expecting, which was my friends from high school who weren't athletes and who had been spending their college experience networking, preparing for jobs, and preparing for more of a corporate setting. And so as I graduated and was preparing for my master's program, I felt this pressure of being behind, right? Because I had spent all my time on my sport. it felt like, I should be, moving up on the next job. I should already have this lined up. And it felt kind of just a lot of anxiety, right, around what the next move was. And if I make the wrong move, am I going to get pigeonholed? So that first year, I would say, I was definitely thinking really deeply about, was I going to make an industry change for my full-time job and then go to school at night? And what would that look like for me? So there was definitely a lot of just decision making that needed to happen in that time, while I'm also grieving my, who I once was. So it was this kind of weird transitionary period. And I had a hard time just letting go of the idea that, it was done, right? And moving on to that next chapter. But eventually I did get my first job, which is where I'm still currently at, is working on the business and ops side of a telehealth, mental wellness company. And realized that I loved the business side of things. And I think that's, again, where that athlete comes out of me, is that, moving in fast-paced environments and really enjoying kind of the startup mode is what I, call it. And so that shocked me, because I had always been interested in psychology, which is a little bit of a more slower pace in at least the therapeutic setting. So just kind of balancing these two sides of me, this competitive edge that, likes the business, more corporate side, and then also at the same time, balancing the therapeutic side. So there are two sides that I realized that can coexist within each other. And then as this is all happening, also starting Breaking Barriers as a nonprofit organization. So I definitely had my, hands in different baskets. And that is, though, where I thrived, because as an athlete, you balance all these different things. That worked for me. So I still, like I said, keep different aspects of my life. I'm still like that. I have to be doing 30 things at once. So I think it was definitely hard. And although of course, I think I'll always miss that time in my life, I can now say, that chapter is closed, but there's still pieces of me that get to show up on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, no, that you unpacked a lot there. So there's definitely some good things. I think a lot of athletes, face that struggle, especially the identity. They identify themselves as the sport, and they just don't know what to do. And I think the biggest thing is, again, to start preparing and thinking about things. I mean, it's kind of hard when you're playing a competitive sport, which is realizing that you got, 30, 40, 50 years ahead of you as a career. So maybe give just a couple of words of advice to athletes as they look at that next chapter and transition out of the sport. What would you say to them?
Yeah. I think that, life after sports isn't about starting over. It's about, like I said, kind of transferring what you've learned. Athletes don't lose value when the game ends, and they learn, just how to apply it differently. My professional work became my way of doing that. And I think just staying grounded in those moments and knowing that it's okay for it to be an uneasy and transitionary time. And for the athletes that are current and still have time before they graduate or move on from their sport, I think there's a room to also explore your next chapter while also staying in present with what you're currently doing. So, researching what your next moves are, and being realistic about, okay, well, this, you can't realistically play these sports at a very high level till you're 80, right? So
Right.
what are things that make me happy and fuel me in the same way that my sports once.
Okay, great advice there. So let's fast forward. Let's talk about you had this vision, and again, utilizing that your athlete background and all, starting Breaking Barriers. So talk about what led to that, and then just tell us about all the things you're doing there today.
Would love to. Yeah, so when I was around 6 years old, my father passed away due to suicide. When I was in high school, I also had a male therapist who passed away to suicide. So those two losses that kind of brought up grief that I didn't fully understand at the time. And so then when I started my first year of Division I beach volleyball, I kind of just threw myself into it without processing some of that grief and some of those feelings, and I buried them down. Grief is already a very stigmatized topic. And so combining that with an athletic environment where you don't want to be seen as weak or judged by others, then that silence is going to shine through. And so I noticed that in my play, I saw my performance being affected by my mental health. I saw my worth being placed on how well I played in my performance, and just really struggled. And so it took me a long time to realize that I needed to prioritize my mental the same way that I did my physical. And once I did, I felt so much more empowerment in my performance. I saw it improve. And then I started to look around, and I realized I wasn't the only one struggling. People just weren't talking about it, right? So all of, from teammates to other peers that are in the athletic world were really struggling as well. But again, they weren't talking about it because fears of having their scholarship taken away, of people judging them, of playtime taken away. So it just caused people to kind of carry these feelings really silently and stigmatize them. And so the reason I think that I realized that is because of this is the culture around athletics. That idea of mental toughness or pushing through pain is a lot of times misconstrued. I think mental toughness is being vulnerable and dealing with your feelings and being able to process them. But a lot of times the way that the language and culture speaks about this topic makes it seem like we should push it down and just play through it. So I noticed that a lot of people were struggling as well. And I decided, let me start an organization, or at the time, a club, where we kind of just sit down and talk about this, right? Because we're all struggling, we all feel it, and there's nothing, no change happening. So we started as just a club. We would meet bi-weekly and pick a different topic each time. It would be whether it's injury-induced depression, performance anxiety, eating disorders, whatnot. We would do education on it, resources, and then we'd do journaling to process whatever feelings were coming up. And then people could kind of do either a discussion or come up and tell their story. And so we had a lot of athletes who I actually wasn't even really friends with, but they came up and told their stories and felt empowered to do so, and created the sense of a community. It was completely student-led. There was no one else in the room with us. And we just started having these fairly, vulnerable conversations that I don't think there was space for us to have in other aspects. And so eventually, the administration, the athletic department started noting breaking barriers. They invited me to speak at a donor ball for mental health for athletes. And I started to see how advocacy can really create change. We ended up being able to hire a sports psychologist because of some of the efforts that the club permitted a petition to have a sports psychologist. And so I felt empowered to kind of speak for people who struggled like me and felt alone, but really weren't. And also, in general, my background in psychology, wanting to help people like my dad or the people I've lost, or even myself who was grieving, so that they no longer have to feel alone anymore. And so after I graduated, I decided that Breaking Barriers was going to be more than just a club to me, right? It's something that I'm deeply passionate about, and I think it's extremely necessary, especially the suicide rates rising. Suicide is now the second leading cause of death for student athletes, and the rate of athletes seeking help for resources is extremely low. So I knew there was a need, and I essentially created Breaking Barriers to be a nonprofit organization. And now we do a lot of amplifying student athlete voices because we have that core belief of when we share and empower each other, we create a space for those uncomfortable conversations. So we do featured athlete testimonials, blog posts, storytelling and awareness campaigns. And then the education side of it, we deliver resources in the form of training, psychoeducation, toolkits, webinars, groups for athletes and support systems, and then running programs as well. So on the coach side of things, one thing that we're really passionate about at Breaking Barriers is the coach, parent, and admin side. So obviously there's the athlete side, the advocacy side, where we're raising awareness, trying to break the stigma. But then on the other side is that the reality is most of these coaches and people who are adults responsible for these athletes aren't trained on how to deal with mental health, but they're around it all the time, and likely they're the trusted person that an athlete would speak up to if they're feeling a certain type of way or struggling. And so providing just base level education on language and culture for coaching is something that we're really passionate about. Not just coaching, again, parents and admin members, faculty. We do community events, workshops, fundraising events, and then eventually we're going to start launching some campus chapters and peer-led initiatives. So similar to what Breaking Barriers was at the club level at my university, but spreading that kind of nationwide is the goal. But we just hired a full staff leadership team, and the team is expanding. So really trying to just widen our reach and broaden our initiatives this year. And I'm excited to see where it goes, because I think mental health advocacy for athletes specifically, it's such an important niche, and it's, I hope to be the voice for people who felt similarly to me.
No, that's great. It's great what you're doing, because obviously it is a major issue, and a lot of things you're talking about. And so, is there a platform or like a with the community that people join? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, at this time, it's only just based on our website and social media. Our website contains all of the resources, and then the groups are kind of, again, connected within our website. And we're moving into some referral programs, so referrals to therapist groups, so an athlete coming to us wanting to seek a sports psychologist, etc. Right now, again, it's not a platform yet, but eventually we do plan to transition as we kind of grow into a more specific platform. But I think the first step right now is the raising awareness piece, is amplifying the athletes, so that we can, when we do scale to build those platforms, that we have that audience watching.
Okay. No, this all sounds great. I mean, that's the whole idea of this podcast too, is just to teach and inspire athletes that there is life after sports. And there's so many stories out there. I mean, you talk about the unfortunate suicides, and you hear about them throughout. I mean, college athletes and professional athletes. I mean, one thing too is, you're talking to even like, Olympians,
Mm-hmm.
and, that's a big area. They've done different documentaries. One that I always talk about is Weight of Gold.
Mm-hmm.
That's narrated by Michael Phelps. So you're familiar with that. And I think, just I guess as athletes, don't be afraid to reach out and ask for help. I mean, because it's help is out there for you. There's a lot of people that want to help, and what you're doing is great. And I like the fact of just kind of spreading that around to different schools, because I mean, I think it's important to catch it at that younger age.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And right now we do speak with a lot of college level athletes, but I think the goal as we kind of move in is a wider spread. So the high school level and the youth, and then the pro as well. And I think each level has a different stigma, right? On the
Right.
pro level, there's a different pressure level. And then of course the youth, you're, learning all the things that are going to lead you to your next chapter. So I think there's a lot of room for different populations and resources for each section.
Yeah, so how can people find you?
Yeah. So right now they can find us on Instagram. Our Instagram is breakingbarriers.org. And then same thing for TikTok is breakingbarriers.org. And then the main page is just our website. So that's going to be www.breakingbarriers.org.com.
Okay, great. So yeah, people definitely need to reach out. You can find us at alumnidirect.com. The podcast Athletes, Entrepreneurs, Alumni Journey is on our YouTube channel and across all the different podcast networks. And each week I talk about getting the nuggets and just the different advice and stories from the athletes, which is very impactful. And just, we always say we want to help at least one. Obviously, we want to help a lot more than that, but just getting out there and encouraging people to watch it. So, Honey, this has been great. We really appreciate the time.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And I want to say too, to any, current or former athletes as well, I think the biggest thing when talking about transitioning into careers and life after sport is finding what you're passionate about too, right? Finding, like I said, I found a balance for myself that works. I think you're going to go really far if you're passionate about what you do. So just kind of find that niche and use the drive to focus on it.
Absolutely. Great word. So until next time, thanks for another great edition of Athletes, Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey.